The day Elena Marquez walked into that dusty county auction, she had just $42 left in her bank account, and absolutely no intention of changing her life. But fate doesn't wait for permission. It strikes fast, violent, like a match in a room soaked with gasoline, and when the auctioneer announced a condemned casino starting at $8,000, something inside her snapped awake. A single mom on the edge, a building everyone else feared to touch, and a secret sealed beneath its ruins that would shake the entire town. This was the moment everything began to unravel. The day Elena Marquez walked into that dusty county auction, she had just $42 left in her bank account, and absolutely no intention of changing her life. But fate rarely knocks softly. It storms in, uninvited and unapologetic, turning ordinary days into turning points no one sees coming. And when the auctioneer announced a condemned casino starting at $8,000, something deep inside her, some instinct stitched together from fear, exhaustion, and the last spark of courage, rose to the surface. A single mother on the edge, a building everyone else feared to touch, and a secret sealed beneath its ruins that would soon shake the entire town. This was the moment everything began to unravel. After the echo of that opening bid rippled through the room, Elena felt the world around her tilt in a way she couldn't explain. People shifted in their chairs, whispered, looked at her with a mixture of confusion and disbelief, as though she had wandered into a place meant for bigger wallets and smaller hearts. But she didn't blink, not even when her pulse began to drum against her ribs like a warning. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and dust, a scent that reminded her of overdue bills and long nights at her second job. The flickering fluorescent lights overhead cast a pale glow across her tired face, revealing the shadows born from years of sleepless worry. She wore that exhaustion like a second skin, but today, beneath it, something else stirred, something defiant. She hadn't planned to bid. She hadn't even planned to be here. The day had begun like all the others, dropping Leo off at school, rushing to the diner for the morning shift, juggling bills in her mind the way some people juggle dreams. But during her 10-minute break, she saw the auction notice taped crookedly on the community board. Condemned properties public auction today only. A whisper in her mind said, go, not because she had money, but because she had run out of places to fall. Now she stood in the crowded room, gripping her purse strap with trembling fingers, listening as the auctioneer's voice filled the air like a drumbeat. Lot 19, B, former Laskin Casino, condemned, structural instability, fire damage, sold as is. More murmurs, more cold drafts of rumor and dread weaving through the room. The casino's name alone stirred uneasy looks. The Laskin Casino, once the crown jewel of the desert highway, lit in gold and glass, a playground for high rollers and night owls. Then came the fire, the investigations, the vanishing of its enigmatic owner, Victor Laskin. No body, no answers, no closure. The place fell into darkness, abandoned to dust and desert wind, and now it sat here, reduced to a line item on a clipboard. Elena, what are you doing? She whispered to herself, but the voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone watching from outside her own life. The bidding started low, almost mockingly so. $8,000, the auctioneer called, glancing around the room. Do I hear 8? 5, silence. Even the boldest flippers didn't want it. Too dangerous, too broken, too haunted by stories that never quite faded. Elena didn't know what struck her, hope, madness, or destiny, but her hand lifted before she could stop it. A small, fragile gesture, barely above her shoulder, but the room felt it, like a spark jumping across dry kindling. Bid of 8,000, the auctioneer announced, eyebrows raised. Do I hear 8, 5? Still nothing. No one else dared. Time stretched. Elena felt the weight of 100 eyes pressing against her, some amused, others pitying, a few simply waiting to see whether she would crumble under her own boldness. But she didn't, going once. Her heart pounded, going twice. Her throat tightened, sold. A single sharp bang of the gavel cracked through the room like lightning splitting a tree, and just like that, her life changed. Elena exhaled softly, feeling the tremor in her hands as people stepped aside, creating a quiet aisle around her, as if she carried something dangerous. Perhaps she did. One of the older men at the back shook his head slowly, giving her a look that felt like a warning carved from years of silent truths. She swallowed hard, clutching the receipt the county clerk handed her. The ink was still warm. The reality was burning hotter. She had just bought a demolished, condemned casino for $8,000. The kind of move only the desperate or the chosen make. Outside the courthouse, the late afternoon sun hit her like a wall of heat, bright and unforgiving. She stood on the steps for a moment, letting the wind pull at her hair as her mind raced. She could still hear the echo of the gavel, still feel the shift of something unseen, like the ground beneath her had just opened a new path she couldn't turn away from. She didn't know if she'd made the greatest mistake of her life, or the beginning of the miracle she'd been waiting for. Either way, there was no turning back. The Laskin casino waited for her. And as the wind brushed against her face, carrying the faintest scent of burnt wood from somewhere far off in the desert, Elena realized one simple truth: her story was no longer standing still. It had begun to move, fast, carrying her toward a place that had been abandoned by the world, but not by destiny. As evening crept across the sky, she stepped toward her car, knowing she would drive straight to the casino. She needed to see it, to feel its silence, to face whatever lived inside its broken walls. And as the first stars flickered awake above her, she whispered to herself with a trembling breath, "Whatever waits for me in there, I'm ready." The night heard her, the casino did too. And in its dark, hollow halls, something shifted as if welcoming the return of the one person brave enough to claim it. As the night deepened, Elena didn't yet realize that stepping inside those crumbling doors would be the moment her real story began. The drive toward the old Laskin casino carried a strange stillness, the kind that settles over the desert when the sun has surrendered and the land begins to cool. Elena's headlights cut long silver lines across the empty highway, illuminating drifting sand and forgotten road signs that rattled softly in the wind. Every mile she drove seemed to pull her deeper into something unseen, something waiting, patient and ancient, beneath the ruins she now owned. Leo's empty booster seat in the back felt heavier than ever. She imagined his wide brown eyes when she'd tell him she bought a building. No, a casino. He'd laugh first, she knew. Then he'd believe her, because children didn't question miracles the way adults do. They accepted them, they expected them, and maybe, just maybe, that was why she'd done it. Because she was tired of living in a world where hope was something other people talked about in past tense. The sky had dimmed to a deep violet when the casino finally rose on the horizon, dark, jagged, and hulking like the spine of some long, dead creature. Its broken signs still clung to the facade, metal letters dangling by rusted bolts, casting strange shadows across the cracked parking lot. The desert wind moaned through shattered windows, carrying with it the scent of old ash and forgotten nights. Elena parked her car near what had once been the main entrance. For a long moment she didn't move. She simply sat there, hands resting on the steering wheel, staring at the building that looked like it was holding its breath. "You wanted a new beginning," she whispered to herself. "This is it." She stepped out into the cooling air, gravel crunching softly beneath her shoes. With each step toward the towering doors, She felt a mix of fear and determination twisting through her chest. The casino came into sharper focus. Chipped marble pillars, vines creeping across faded red trim, rust stains streaking down weather-worn stone. Once, this place had gleamed with gold and champagne bubbles. Now it stood silent, a monument to everything power could build and destroy. She reached the door and pushed lightly. It groaned open with a long, aching sigh, releasing a breath of stale air that smelled of dust, smoke, and memories sealed away too long. Her heart pounded, but she stepped inside anyway, letting the darkness swallow her like ink spreading across paper. The lobby appeared in pieces as her eyes adjusted. First the grand chandelier overhead, or what remained of it. Dozens of shattered crystals hung loosely, shimmering faintly under the weak beam of moonlight seeping through broken skylights. Beneath it, the marble floor was cracked like dry earth, littered with fragments of glass and forgotten chips from the blackjack tables. Elena slowly walked forward, the sound of her footsteps echoing across the hollow space. Every echo felt like a question the building was asking her. Why are you here? What do you want? What are you willing to risk? Her breath formed soft clouds in the cold air. She rubbed her arms, trying to chase away the prickling sensation crawling across her skin. It wasn't fear, not exactly. More like the feeling of being watched by something that wasn't human, but wasn't hostile either. Something ancient, curious. Near the reception counter, she paused. A ledger lay open, coated in a thick layer of dust, but perfectly centered on the desk, as though someone had placed it there moments before walking away. The pages had yellowed, and the ink had bled into the paper in soft blue halos. She brushed her fingers across the surface, sending a small puff of dust swirling into the air. A sudden creak echoed from somewhere deeper inside the casino. Elena froze. The sound was light, subtle, but unmistakable. A floorboard bending under weight. A whisper of movement where no one should be. The air thickened around her, tightening like a rope drawn slowly. Probably just the wind. She murmured, but the words felt flimsy, hollow. She took another step and then another. Her shoes brushed against torn carpet and old playing cards scattered across the floor, their edges curled and burnt. She knelt down, picking one up, the Queen of Hearts. Singed across the crown, as though someone had tried to burn it. Many had tried. She could smell the soot still clinging to it. A ghost of a whisper slithered down the hallway behind her, so faint she almost believed she imagined it. Her pulse quickened. Moonlight spilled across the far wall, illuminating a set of massive steel doors at the end of the lobby. Doors that didn't match the rest of the casino's decor. They looked industrial, reinforced, and deeply out of place. She didn't know it then, but she was staring at the first sign of what really lay hidden beneath this broken empire. As she approached them, the cold intensified. Her breath turned to mist. Her skin prickled. The metal stood untouched by time, no rust, no dents, just two enormous panels sealed firmly shut. She reached out and pressed her fingertips against the steel. It was freezing. And for a moment, just a moment, she felt something faint tremble beneath her touch, like a pulse buried deep within the metal, a heartbeat that didn't belong to anything living. She yanked her hand back, breath trembling. A second creak echoed from behind her, then another, softer, closer. Her mind raced. She wasn't supposed to be here alone at night. The building was condemned for structural instability. Parts of the ceiling sagged dangerously above her, casting long shadows that moved with the faintest breeze. But this was different. She turned slowly, scanning the vast, dark lobby. Dust swirled in thin clouds. The chandelier pieces chimed faintly like distant bells. Then, something small rolled across the floor and tapped her shoe. A single poker chip, black, worn, glinting faintly as though freshly moved. Elena's breath caught in her throat. Someone had dropped it, or someone had pushed it. The casino felt alive now, as if the walls had woken with her presence and were whispering secrets through cracks in the plaster. She stepped backward until she felt the cold steel of the mysterious door behind her. Her hand pressed instinctively against it for grounding. She inhaled deeply, trying to steady herself. Whatever this building held, whatever stories, whatever dangers, whatever fortune, she was already too far inside to walk away. The city had written this place off as condemned, but Elena sensed something else. Something buried, something waiting, something that hadn't been meant for the world outside anymore. She bent down slowly, picked up the poker chip, and closed it in her palm. The plastic felt faintly warm, as though someone had touched it seconds ago. Elena straightened, exhaled softly, and whispered into the hollow silence around her, "If you want me to leave, you're going to have to show me why." Her voice echoed faintly against the walls, carrying into the dark hallways like a promise. And somewhere in the casino, deep in the shadows beyond the reach of moonlight, another soft creak answered her. The building was not empty, not anymore. As the night thickened around her, Elena felt the first stirrings of something she couldn't name, an invitation or a warning, and she understood that her journey into the ruins had only just begun. After a restless night filled with whispers that didn't belong to dreams, Elena returned to the ruined casino at first light, determined to understand what she had stepped into. Dawn stretched thin across the desert horizon, painting the broken windows in pale gold, as if trying to resurrect a building that no longer remembered what sunlight felt like. The casino's silhouette stood quiet and unmoving, but in that quietness lingered a tension, something half asleep, something waiting for her to return. She stepped inside with a deeper breath than she truly felt ready for. The lobby greeted her in a different tone than it had the night before. The shadows were softer now, but the memories embedded in the walls remained the same, restless, sharp, ancient. Dust motes floated slowly in the early beams of sunlight, drifting through the air like silent ghosts exploring their own home. The poker chip she had found last night rested in her pocket. Each time her fingers brushed against it, she felt a faint tremor of curiosity and dread. She didn't know if someone had been inside with her, or if the building itself had shifted, settling its bones in the dark. Both possibilities unsettled her, but one truth rose above the fear. She needed answers. Real ones. She moved deeper into the lobby, tracing her steps from the night before. Something compelled her, not fear, not fascination, but the instinct of someone who once had nothing left to lose, and now had something she needed to understand. As she reached the grand staircase leading to the upper floor balconies, her foot brushed against a torn length of velvet carpet, its red fibers still clinging stubbornly to the elegance it once held. Elena's breath caught as she lifted her gaze. Sunlight spilled onto the enormous crystal chandelier above her, the same one that had looked broken and mournful last night. This morning, the fractured pieces shimmered faintly, sending scattered flecks of rainbow across the wall. For a moment, the casino looked alive again, as though remembering a time when music and laughter poured through its veins. "Mom," a small voice echoed in her memory. Leo's voice, his hopeful excitement whenever she talked about possibilities, about dreams, about new beginnings. She wanted this place to be a chance for them. She wanted it to mean something, but something deep inside warned her, nothing this broken is simple. Her footsteps carried her past the reception counter and toward the inner hallways. The silence grew heavier the farther she moved, as though the sunlight couldn't, or wouldn't, follow her into the deeper shadows. Broken slot machines leaned like rusted skeletons along the walls, Their screens cracked, their buttons faded. Old tickets littered the ground like brittle leaves, the ink long washed away by time. As she stepped farther into the casino's interior, Elena noticed a difference. The air was cooler, denser, almost as though the further she walked, the more the building exhaled memories around her. Some areas smelled faintly of mildew and decay, while others carried a sharper, charred scent, remnants of the fire that no one spoke about anymore. Her fingers brushed the wall as she walked. Beneath the peeling wallpaper, she felt grooves, deep scratches carved into the plaster. Not random, not accidental. Someone had clawed at these walls, someone desperate. She turned a corner and stopped abruptly. There, half hidden beneath a collapsed portion of the ceiling, lay a series of velvet-roped stanchions, the kind that once guided lines of wealthy guests toward the baccarat tables. But it wasn't the velvet rope that caught her attention. It was the large framed photograph lying face down on the floor, its glass shattered. Elena knelt and carefully turned it over. Her breath left her chest in a slow, frozen wave. The photograph showed the casino in its glory days, crystal lights blazing, champagne fountains gleaming, staff smiling in crisp uniforms. But at the center of the image stood a tall man with a sharp smile and colder eyes. A man she recognized from vague newspaper articles and forgotten rumors. Victor Laskin, the missing owner, the man whose disappearance still whispered through the desert like a wound refusing to close. But there was something else in the photo, something far more disturbing. Behind him, barely visible at first glance, was a massive steel vault door, not the one she had seen last night. This one had a different structure, rounder, larger, carved with markings she couldn't decipher. And carved into the polished metal surface behind him were the unmistakable shapes of symbols. Strange, angular, etched like warnings or codes. Elena swallowed hard. Leo would want to see this. His curious mind always caught what adults dismissed, and she needed his eyes, his perspective, if she was going to understand any of this. As she set the photograph aside, a sudden weight pressed on the air around her, and a faint metallic rattle echoed from down the corridor. She stood, stiffening, her pulse rising. The sound repeated, soft, rhythmic, something metal tapping, something moving. She followed the corridor cautiously, each step a delicate question asked in the language of fear and determination. The hallway narrowed, the walls tightening as though trying to warn her away. She pressed on, then she saw it. At the end of the hallway, surrounded by piles of debris and shattered glass, hung a single crystal from the broken chandelier above. But it wasn't still. It swayed back and forth, as though someone had just brushed past it. No wind could reach this deep inside, no airflow, no open windows. Someone, or something, had been here moments ago. Elena's heart hammered in her ears, but she forced herself to stay steady, to breathe, to think. She couldn't run, not yet, not until she understood what this building was trying to reveal. She stood there, staring at the gently swaying crystal, realizing with a tightening breath that last night's noises weren't echoes of structural decay. They were footsteps, movements, intentions, and she was no longer simply exploring a forgotten casino. She was uncovering something that wanted to stay hidden. The crystal slowed, then stilled, and in the fading quiet, Elena felt the casino watching her, curiously, silently, waiting for her next move. As morning settled into the ruins, she realized the answers she sought were deeper still, buried in dust and silence, urging her to keep going. Elena stood beneath the still crystal, feeling the casino's silence tighten around her like a slow, closing fist. The deeper she ventured, the clearer it became that this place was not simply abandoned. It was paused, held in a strange suspension between what it had once been and what it refused to let go of. And she was moving through its memories, one careful step at a time. She continued down the red, carpeted hallway, her footsteps muffled by layers of dust and time. Old wall sconces leaned crookedly, their golden frames tarnished, as if the fire that had ravaged part of the building had breathed its last breath right here. She could almost imagine flames licking the walls, smoke curling through the corridors, shadows running in panic. But the hallway now lay in perfect stillness, as though it had sealed away the past out of pride or shame. A soft thud echoed somewhere behind her, not loud, but unmistakable. She didn't turn, not yet. Instead, she stopped walking and listened, her breath gentle but tight. The air felt different now, charged, as though the building itself had exhaled something into the dust. She waited. Seconds stretched long and thin, and for a moment she wondered if her imagination was playing tricks on her. Then, another soft thud and a gentle scrape. This time she turned. Her eyes traveled slowly across the dim hallway, scanning every shadow, every broken fixture, every open doorway. Dust floated lazily in the slanted beams of light coming from a cracked window above. Nothing moved, not the shadows, not the air, not a single piece of rubble, but the sound had been real. She tightened her grip on her purse strap, grounding herself with the motion. Fear had never been her enemy. It was the exhaustion beneath it that threatened to unravel her. She inhaled deeply, exhaled slowly, and moved toward the sound instead of away from it. Her steps led her to a wide doorway framed by charred wood, the remnants of a room that had taken the worst of the fire. The burnt smell intensified here, sharper, older, as though the fire still lingered in the ashes. When she stepped inside, she found what remained of the casino's old lounge. The one, slavish space now sagged under the weight of destruction. Soot-soaked furniture, warped tables, melted decor that had once been polished gold. Elena took another step, and something crunched beneath her shoe. She looked down, a photograph, burnt around the edges, curled, brittle, but still revealing just enough to strike a spark of recognition. It was the same man, Victor Laskin, but in this picture, he wasn't standing confidently beside smiling guests or casino staff. Here, he stood alone, haunted. His expression was sharper, his eyes unfocused, the smile on his lips strained, almost fearful, and behind him in the photograph was the same odd vault door from the image she'd found earlier. Only this time it appeared open. Elena's chest tightened. She slid the photograph carefully into her pocket, knowing Leo would want to examine it. He always noticed details adults overlook, small things that changed everything. As she tucked the photo away, a faint metallic clink echoed from deeper inside the lounge. Elena's breath stilled. The sound wasn't random. It had rhythm, deliberate, measured, like someone moving. She stepped forward, following the noise, weaving between collapsed beams and scorched booths. Her shoes brushed against ashes and shattered tiles. The lounge became colder the farther she walked, not cooler, colder, a thin, uncomfortable chill that settled at the back of her neck. Then she saw it. A shadow, long and thin, stretched across the far wall, too sharp to be a trick of the light, too defined to be alone. It shifted slightly, as though whoever it belonged to had just taken a step. Elena froze. But the shadow didn't move again, didn't shrink, didn't fade. It simply hung there, suspended on the wall, disconnected from anything she could see. She blinked slowly, forcing herself to breathe through the tightness climbing her throat. "Hello," she called softly, her voice steady despite the tremor coiling in her stomach. No reply, not even a whisper. She waited another long moment, then edged closer. Step by careful step, she approached the extended shadow. The casino's silence echoed around her, pressing in from all sides. When she reached the very edge of the wall, she finally understood what she was looking at. It wasn't a human shadow. It was the shape of a doorway that had been sealed off by a thick slab of plaster and soot-covered wood. The shadow had formed because the morning sun from the broken window behind her had found a thin crack in the wall. The shape was unmistakable, a tall rectangular outline, edges subtle but deep, a hidden entrance no one would notice unless they were looking at exactly the right moment. A cold thrill ran through her. This wall shouldn't be here. This entrance shouldn't exist. But the casino had been hiding it. She reached out and brushed her fingertips along the outline. The plaster crumbled slightly beneath her touch, flaking away in small pieces. Behind it she felt something solid, metal, cold and unyielding, a door. Her pulse quickened. She pressed her palm flat against the surface. The metal was freezing, the same freezing cold she'd felt on the massive steel doors in the lobby. The same sensation that made her skin tighten and her instincts flare with curiosity and dread. She leaned in, listening. For a heartbeat-long moment, it felt like something on the other side pressed back. She inhaled sharply, stepping away. The air suddenly felt thin, as though the casino itself had drawn in a breath to match her. This wasn't just a renovation nightmare or a structural oddity. The building was hiding corridors, hiding rooms, hiding secrets carved into its bones long before it burned. Elena, she nearly jumped out of her skin. It wasn't a ghost. It wasn't a stranger. It was Leo's voice. She spun around, and there he stood, 10 years old, hair messy from the wind, backpack still half-zipped, eyes wide at the sight of the ruined lounge. "Mom," he said again, stepping toward her, worry rushing across his face. "You weren't answering your phone. I got scared." Relief washed through her with overwhelming warmth. She knelt and held him tightly, feeling his small arms wrap around her. For a moment, the building's cold breath faded, replaced by the comfort of her son's heartbeat. When she pulled back, he looked past her shoulder at the cracked wall. "What's that?" he whispered. Elena exhaled slowly, her breath trembling. "A door," she said quietly. "A door someone didn't want found." Leo stared at it with wide fascination, then looked back at her. "Do we open it?" "Not yet," she wanted to say. But curiosity flickered in her chest, pushing her toward the unknown. "First," she whispered, "we need to figure out where it leads." Leo nodded, stepping closer to examine the faint lines of the hidden entrance. Sunlight dimmed behind a drifting cloud, and the casino grew a shade darker around them. Together, they stared at the sealed door, mother and son, standing on the threshold of a secret buried in ash and steel. And in that moment, Elena knew, whatever lay behind that wall was the next step in the story they had already begun. As the day deepened, the hidden doorway cast a quiet promise at their feet, urging them forward into the mystery waiting below. After discovering the sealed doorway hidden beneath layers of ash and plaster, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that the casino was slowly revealing itself to her, piece by piece, like a wounded creature deciding whether she was a threat or a savior. All morning, the outline of that buried entrance haunted her mind. The casino's silence felt heavier now, not empty but holding its breath, waiting for her next step. She returned to the lounge with Leo close beside her, the dust rising beneath their shoes as the air thickened with the scent of burnt fabric and old secrets. Sunlight cut thin stripes across the floor through narrow cracks in the ceiling, but even those fragile beams felt reluctant to enter this part of the building. The sealed door loomed before them, half hidden behind debris, the outline now unmistakable in the soft glow. It stretched taller than she remembered, as though the shadow had grown since the night before. Elena approached it slowly, her fingers brushing the wall's rough surface. More plaster crumbled away, falling in pale flakes that caught in the shafts of light like drifting snow. Leo watched with wide, alert eyes. "Mom, this wall doesn't match the rest of the room," he whispered. "Look at the pattern, it's thicker here." He was right. The plaster was uneven, patched, layered with something far heavier than simple repairs. It was as if someone had tried to bury this entrance fast, loppy, urgent, with no concern for blending it with the rest of the architecture. "Why would someone seal off a door?" he murmured. Elena didn't answer right away. Her fingertips traced deeper grooves, feeling the cold metal beneath. The question seemed too large for words. Why would someone bury a doorway deep inside a burning casino? Why block it so aggressively? And what was important enough to hide that even the fire couldn't reveal it? A soft vibration shuddered through the metal, so faint she nearly dismissed it. But the tremor lingered long enough to send a cold prickle up her arm. Leo's gaze snapped to her. "Did you feel that?" She nodded, slow and tense. Something moved behind the wall, not loud, not clear, but something. A flicker of fear brushed her thoughts, but another feeling rose stronger: determination. She had survived things harder than fear. She had fought for years against life's unyielding edges. Whatever waited here couldn't be worse than the world outside had already shown her. Elena reached into her bag and pulled out a small flashlight. When she clicked it on, the beam sliced through the dim air with pristine clarity. Dust particles sparkled in the light like drifting embers. She raised the beam, scanning the edges of the sealed doorway. That's when she saw it, a faint black smear near the lower corner of the wall. Not a mark of fire, not mold, something else. She crouched down and angled the light. The smear wasn't random at all, it was a symbol, burned faintly into the plaster. Sharp lines, curved edges, almost like a playing card emblem, but distorted, stretched, twisted. Leo knelt beside her, squinting. "Is that a club symbol, like on cards?" "Yes," Elena whispered, but altered, like someone wanted to change it. Before she could examine it further, a sudden noise echoed faintly down the hall, a soft, rhythmic tapping, steady and distant. Elena's pulse tightened. Leo leaned closer to her. "Someone's here," he breathed. The sound didn't match footsteps. It was too controlled, too deliberate. Tap, pause, tap, pause, tap, pause, as though someone were tapping metal with a single finger, or signaling. Elena slowly rose to her feet, turning the flashlight toward the hallway. The beam reached only a few yards before dissolving into thick darkness. She strained her ears. The tapping stopped. The silence that followed felt unnatural, stretched thin, almost humming, like the building was waiting for something to happen. Leo gripped her arm. "Mom, maybe we should go," but she shook her head gently. "Not yet. We didn't come this far to run, not now." He nodded slowly, trusting her even though the fear flickered behind his eyes. They turned back to the sealed doorway. Elena pressed her palm flat against the cold metal beneath the plaster. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling its temperature seep into her skin. Something was behind this door. Something the casino didn't want forgotten. She stepped back and scanned the rest of the lounge. The walls were coated in soot and age, but the section around the sealed door was subtly different, less damaged, as if it had been reinforced. Even the fire hadn't fully touched it. Leo pointed suddenly. "Mom, look here." At the edge of the debris pile covering the base of the doorway, a glint of something metallic caught the flashlight beam. Elena knelt beside it and brushed away the dust. A hinge, a massive steel hinge. Her chest tightened. This wasn't a decorative doorway or an architectural mistake. This was a door meant to stay closed. A door someone had forced the casino to swallow. fast and without record. Elena, Leo whispered, his voice trembling. Do you think it's connected to the vault? The word vault drifted through the silent room like a cold gust. She remembered the photographs, the symbols, Victor Laskin standing in front of a door that didn't exist in any public plans. Yes, she said quietly, I think this might be part of it. Leo's breath hitched, a mixture of fear and fascination. The casino seemed to react, its broken chandelier chiming faintly overhead, the lonely sound echoing through the hollow beams. Elena stood again, adjusting her grip on the flashlight. She wasn't ready to open this wall yet. Not without tools, not without a plan, not without knowing what dangers still breathed inside the building. But today had given her something more valuable than answers. It had given her direction, a path, a reason to keep going deeper. She looked at her son, his determined little face mirroring her own. We're going to map this place, she said softly, every hallway, every hidden room, everything they tried to bury. Leo's eyes brightened despite the fear. Like an adventure, she smiled faintly, like the truth. Together, they backed away from the sealed doorway. The air seemed to shift again, settling into a heavy, expectant stillness. The casino wasn't finished revealing itself. Not even close, and as they stepped back into the dim corridor, leaving the hidden door behind for now, Elena felt the certainty settle deep in her bones. Something inside these walls wanted their attention, and whatever lay behind that sealed metal door was only the beginning. As they walked toward the lobby, the casino's shadows trailed behind them, whispering the promise of mysteries waiting to surface, urging them onward into the darkness ahead. The long walk back toward the casino's central corridor felt heavier than the narrow path they'd taken into the lounge. With each step, Elena sensed the building shifting around them, not physically, but in tone, in presence, in its quiet insistence that they were not done here. Dust seemed to cling to her breath, and the hollow silence trailed behind her and Leo with an almost deliberate patience. They crossed back into the main hall where fractured skylights filtered muted daylight onto broken tile. The distant hum of the desert wind drifted faintly through shattered windows, but inside these walls the air felt thick, unmoving, as though the building didn't want anything from the outside world to disturb whatever waited within its bones. Leo walked close to his mother, glancing behind them every few steps. Mom, do you think someone else has been exploring this place, like we're not alone? Elena paused, listening. The silence answered back, too clean, too absolute. There's something here, she murmured, but I don't know if it's someone, or something left behind. Leo swallowed hard, but he didn't argue. Instead, he reached into his backpack and pulled out his small sketch pad, the one he always carried everywhere, and flipped to a fresh page. What are you doing? Elena asked gently. Making a map, he whispered. Like you said, so we don't get lost, and so we can find that door again. She felt a quiet warmth bloom in her chest. Even here, in a place breathing with soot and secrets, her son's bravery held steady. They continued deeper into the inner corridors, following hallways where wallpaper peeled like old skin and torn carpet, curled into brittle waves beneath their feet. Every room they passed had its own story, unspoken, broken, and waiting to be discovered. A collapsed poker room, a shattered bar lined with melted bottles, a row of slot machines frozen mid-spin, as if the fire had frozen time itself. Leo sketched quickly as they moved, drawing boxes for rooms, squiggles for corridors, little notations only he understood. Elena guided him with quiet directions, making sure to mark every turn. But the deeper they went, the more the buildings seemed to disagree with their intrusion. A faint vibration trembled along the floorboards, subtle enough to question, real enough to fear. Elena felt it through the soles of her shoes, a rhythmic pulse echoing faintly from somewhere below. Not mechanical, not electrical, something else. Leo stopped drawing, eyes narrowing. Mom, what is that? I don't know, she answered quietly. But it's coming from beneath us. As if in response, another tremor rippled lightly through the floor, rising through the dust like a heartbeat. Elena braced herself against the wall, the cold of the plaster grounding her. Leo pressed close, staring at the floor as though expecting something to break through. The vibration faded, slowly, then stopped. The silence that followed felt heavier than before, like the building had paused its breath. Elena exhaled shakily. "We keep going," she whispered, though she wasn't sure who she was convincing, Leo or herself. They followed a narrow hallway leading toward what had once been the casino's entertainment wing. Posters clung to the walls in curling corners, faces of glamorous performers long forgotten. Their smiles faded into ghostly expressions under layers of dust. A stage once used for orchestras and singers stretched at the end of the hall, its curtains stiff with soot, its wooden floor warped from heat. Leo pointed toward the far corner. "Mom, look." Beyond the stage, tucked against the wall, stood a heavy trunk, charred, dented, but still intact. Elena approached it cautiously. The metal clasps were rusted, but the lid cracked open beneath her fingers with a low groan. Inside lay remnants of the casino's past: cloth, covered ledgers singed at the edges, stacks of playing cards fused together by fire, old photos warped from heat. But buried beneath the rubble, her fingers brushed something smooth. She lifted it, a white envelope, edges browned but untouched by flame. Her breath stilled. It had Victor Laskin's name printed on the front. Neat, precise, undamaged. Leo leaned in, eyes wide. "Mom, why didn't it burn?" Elena turned the envelope in her hands. The paper was still firm, not brittle. The seal had been broken long ago, but the contents inside felt intact. She reached inside and pulled out a folded picture. When she opened it, a chill rippled through her. It was another photograph of Victor Laskin, but this one was different. This one mattered. Victor wasn't posing. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't even aware of the camera. He was running down a dark corridor, the same corridor Elena and Leo had just explored. His face twisted in fear, eyes locked on something behind him, something outside the frame. And behind him, the same twisted symbol Elena had seen burned into the plaster on the sealed door. Elena's stomach tightened. Victor hadn't been running from the fire. He had been running long before the flames ever touched the casino. Leo touched the photo gently, his voice soft. "Mom, look at the corner." She lowered the flashlight. There, printed faintly on the bottom edge, was a timestamp. The date matched the night Victor Laskin disappeared. A cold realization washed over Elena like ice down her spine. He hadn't simply vanished. He had been running toward something, or away from something, something that led him to the sealed door. Elena folded the photo carefully and slipped it into her pocket with the others. Her heartbeat steadied, slow and heavy. She didn't choose this path. The building chose her, and now it was showing her truths buried under ash and lies. Leo tugged her sleeve gently. "Mom, we have to open that door, don't we?" She looked at him, seeing the fear and courage warring in his eyes, mirroring her own. "Yes," she whispered, "but not today." The casino seemed to respond with a low groan from deep within its structure, as though dissatisfied with her choice. Or relieved. Elena took Leo's hand as they stepped away from the trunk, the damaged stage looming behind them like a silent witness. The flashlight beam danced across the hallway walls as they made their way back toward the main entrance. The sealed door waited behind them. The truth waited ahead of them. And Elena knew this was only the beginning of the mysteries clawing their way back to life. As they walked toward the fading light, the casino's quiet hum followed them, whispering promises of secrets buried deeper than they had yet dared to imagine. After a night spent staring at the photographs spread across her kitchen table, Elena returned to the casino with a weight inside her chest that felt colder than the desert morning. The images of Victor Laskin, some confident, some terrified, had burned themselves into her mind. But it was the last one, the one showing him running down a corridor that no longer existed, that clung to her thoughts like a warning. It wasn't just mystery anymore. It was intent, direction, proof that the building wasn't lying to her. It was guiding her. The sun had barely risen when she stepped inside the lobby, Leo beside her, clutching his sketchbook like a compass. The air felt sharper today, less dusty, more electric, as though something behind the walls had awakened and was watching their arrival with careful curiosity. She switched on her flashlight and scanned the ceiling. The chandelier crystals trembled lightly, chattering faintly against each other. Not enough to imply danger, but enough to suggest motion within the silence. The kind of motion that reveals a building remembering something. Elena's steps echoed softly across the fractured marble floor as she approached the reception counter again. Something had been gnawing at her since yesterday. Something she couldn't quite place. Not fear, not excitement. Something narrower, more focused. The blueprints. The old municipal blueprints she'd seen once at the county records office while searching for repair permits on her rental property. She remembered the dusty cabinets, the brittle pages, the ink that faded in places but never disappeared completely. She remembered the clerk who warned her that the casino files were patchy, incomplete, tampered with over the years. She hadn't believed it mattered then. She believed it now. She turned to Leo, who was studying the cracked floor tiles with fascination. "We're going to find the original lay out of this place." Leo blinked, surprised. Like the real blueprints, yes, the ones they never showed to the public. If Victor built things off the books, that's where the answers will be. Leo nodded slowly, processing the idea with the same quiet determination he inherited from her. "Then we should find the office rooms," he said. "Big buildings always have offices where they keep stuff. Even schools do." Elena smiled faintly. "Exactly." They turned toward the west wing, an area they hadn't explored yet. The hallway here felt narrower, the air cooler. Wallpaper hung in strips, curling inward like skeletal fingers. The floor was uneven, buckling where water damage had soaked through decades earlier. But what stood out most were the scorch marks. They ran along the baseboards in long, jagged streaks, like the fire had crawled through this hallway, dragging furious hands along the walls. Elena swept her flashlight across the room at the end of the hall. "This looks like it," she murmured. The door was labeled Administration in faded gold letters, the metal plate still bolted on despite the fire's touch. She pushed it open, and the hinges groaned in complaint, as though the room hadn't been disturbed since the night everything fell apart. Inside, soot blanketed the floor in thick layers, interrupted only by footprint. Soled ones, hardened into the dust long before she ever set foot here. A row of metal filing cabinets sagged against the wall, their drawers warped from heat. The desk in the corner lay collapsed beneath the weight of fallen ceiling tiles. Leo stepped forward cautiously, examining the room with wide, calculating eyes. "Mom, look." He pointed to a cabinet leaning awkwardly to one side. The metal around the lock was bent outward, not melted, forced open. Recently, no, but not during the fire either. Someone had pried it open long after the building was abandoned. Elena's pulse quickened. She brushed away the soot and gently tugged the drawer. It stuck, then slid open with a screech of rust. Inside lay stacks of charred folders, most empty, their contents either stolen or disintegrated years ago. But at the back, beneath the debris, her fingers touched the edge of a rolled tube, a storage tube. Architects used these, contractors, builders who hid things in plain sight. She pulled it out, holding her breath. The cap had melted slightly, but with a firm twist, it cracked open. Inside, the blueprints unfurled with a puff of dust, thick parchment, The ink faded but legible enough. Leo leaned close as Elena spread the documents across the least damaged section of the floor. She weighed down the corners with old paperweights from the desk. The blueprint showed the casino's official layout: lobby, gaming rooms, lounges, offices, everything perfectly organized, but it was wrong. Incomplete. Too clean. Leo frowned. Where's the basement? Elena scanned the page carefully. The blueprint included electrical routes, plumbing lines, ventilation systems, but there was no basement level at all. Not even a hint of one. That doesn't make sense, she whispered. She shuffled through the remaining sheets.